This week's parasha, Parashat Tazria, begins with a discussion of childbirth, of a woman who gives birth to Tumat Hayoledet, an impurity that comes with it, as well as the mitzvah of the Brit Milah that takes place on the 8th day. Says the pasuk, Daber el bnei Israel emor, speak to the Jewish people saying, Isha ki Tazria vayaleda zachar, if a woman gives birth to a boy, v'tamea shivat yamin k'mei nidat devotah titma, she's going to have an impurity period similar to that of Nadav for 7 days. Ubayom hashemini yimol besar olatova. Comes day number 8. On day number 8, we have a mitzvah. We do a Brit Milah. Okay, so now the pasuk is speaking about the 8th day, the Brit Milah. Now, there's a fun midrash peliyah. In most editions, the midrash peliyah ot ayin. It says, it actually connects this Yom HaShmini in our parasha, the 8th day of the circumcision, to a different Yom HaShmini. Last week's Yom HaShmini, last week's parasha was Parashat Shemini. It was the 8th day, which was the inauguration of the Mishkan. So somehow it's going to connect the inauguration of the Mishkan, including the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, who had run into the Mishkan with that foreign fire and were killed by a heavenly fire. So that's going to be connected to our parasha, our Yom HaShmini, to our Brit Milah. Okay, so says the Midrash Peliyah as follows. The pasuk is going on Aharon being silent after Moshe gives him nechama. Vayidom Aharon, and Aharon was silent. He accepted the judgment against his sons. He did tziduk adin. Says the Midrash, Ma yalolomar, what should he be responded? Uvayom hashemini yimol besar olato. You should have responded, and on the 8th day you circumcise. Okay, what in the world is going on up here? So let's do a little bit of background. So let's go back to that pasuk. Moshe Rabbeinu goes to Aaron. Vayomer Moshe el Aaron, Hu asher diber Adonai lemor bekrovai ekadesh v'apnei kol ha'am ekabed. Moshe Rabbeinu, after the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, go to Aaron and said, Aaron, this is exactly what Hashem was talking about. This is what Hashem meant when He said that He's going to be made kadosh, bekrovai kadesh. He's going to be made holy through those that are close to Hashem. V'apnei kol ha'am ekabed, and His glory is going to be gained. The whole people are gonna have to see a glory in God through the deaths of Nadav and Avihu. Look at how close they were as the midrashim go on. I thought it was gonna be me or you that were gonna die, but look at how much holier your sons were. They're the ones that are gonna make this massive kiddush Hashem by dying right now. Vayidom Aharon, and then Aharon is silent. Aharon accepts the judgment. He accepts Moshe Rabbeinu's nechama. Now, the Chazal tell us, Rashi brings down that there was a big zechut for Aharon being silent. He actually brings us, it's a midrash in Vayikra Rabbah. It's also a Gemara in Zevachim, Kuf Tet Vav Amud Bet, that it says that by Aharon accepting this deen against his sons, by being Vayidom, by being silent, he was zocheh that the very next halacha that we're going to learn a couple of psukim later is going to be spoken directly to him. So it's going to say, Vaydaber Adonai el Aharon lemor, and God spoke to Aharon directly, saying we don't have Aharon. It's not Moshe Aharon, it's God speaking directly to Aharon. And what is the halacha that Hashem teaches Aharon? God teaches him, Yain v'shechar al tesht, ata ubanecha itecha v'vachem el moed. He says that wine and any other kind of alcohol, you and your sons, the Kohanim, are not allowed to drink whenever you go into the tent of meeting. Whenever you go into the Mishkan, you're not allowed to bring that in. Velo tamutu, and then you won't die. If you go in intoxicated, you will die. So therefore, don't go in drinking. This is going to be a chok, a law for all generations. And this is a zechut because it was vayidom. So this mitzvah of not drinking is going to be taught directly to Aharon. It's his zechut. Okay, now the classic midrashim learn the smichut, the juxtaposition of this halacha to the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, that this might be hinting, the halacha of no wine in the temple, or else you're going to die, might be hinting that might be the backstory of why Nadav and Avihu died. There might have been some kind of a mistake over here, maybe a type of a sin, that they entered into the Mishkan after drinking wine. And therefore that's why the two are connected. That, why did they die? Because they went in drinking wine, and therefore now the halacha is being taught through Aharon that you can't drink wine. Now, B'ezrat Hashem, maybe if we'll get to in Parshat Acharei, we might have a recording, maybe we'll discuss this idea of shtuya yain, of them being drinking wine, maybe in a little bit more symbolic terms. But that's the simple midrashim that Aharon gets the zechut to teach a new mitzvah, and this mitzvah is actually hinting to what the sin of Nadav and Avihu actually was. Now, actually, I saw a fun idea about why specifically this halacha of wine, a little bit different than connecting to Nadav and Avihu, but a different reason why this is the zechut, why Aaron's mitzvah that he's taught is the law of the wine. So this is in Sefer Toldot Yitzchak. He says as follows. He says, "Ve'efshar latet tam od l'smichat yain v'shachar mitat bnei Aaron." He says, let me try to give another reason, besides the classic reason that this might have been their sin, but let me try to give a different reason. Why is the mitzvah of not drinking wine being being taught to Aharon after his sons died? So he says as follows: Lefi shayu Aharon uvanav avelim. He says that because Aharon and his sons were avelim, vayayin mesir katzata da'aga, and wine gets rid of a little bit of the pain and a little bit of the worries and the depression that takes place with the mourning. There's a pasuk that teaches that when somebody's in difficult situations, give him a little alcohol, give him a little bit of wine, and wine's going to make him feel a little bit better. I guess drink away your sorrows a little bit from this pasuk. So basically, what would be the natural thing that Aharon should have done right now? What do people do when they're depressed after their mourning? They drink a little bit. And therefore Hashem is telling Aharon, no, you are Kohen Gadol right now, your sons are the Kohanim, we need you guys to do the service right now. And we see that the service continues because their job for society, their communal responsibility is so much greater than their personal mourning. And although there's going to be debate, how much of the service do they do? Did they eat the seir? Did not eat the seir? See last week's Dvar Torah. But ultimately they have to continue doing the service. So therefore the halakha being taught to him is don't drink wine right now. But at the same time, even though he can't drink the actual physical wine, he got something much better. Hashem now speaks to Aharon directly, and that's going to be the nechama. Hashem will teach him the law of not drinking wine, because normally wine, when you drink it, it's supposed to make you feel better. But now, when Hashem's going to speak to you, that's going to be the zechut to make you yismach v'yagel. You're going to be happy because now HaKadosh Baruch Hu is meyachet special time with Aharon, talking to him directly, and that's going to be his nechama directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, but let's get back to our midrash Peliyah. So Aharon is silent. Vayidom Aharon. It's a big zechut. But says this midrash, he could have fought back though. There was a pretty good argument he could have made to Hashem. And he could have said to Hashem, what could he have said? He could have said to God, how could you kill my sons? But didn't you teach us in our parasha right now, in Parashat Tazria, that on the 8th day you circumcise your son? So shouldn't that have saved my sons? Okay, so that's the argument. Now, what in the world is that argument? How does the mitzvah of Brit Milah, how does the mitzvah of the 8th day you circumcise your son, how is that supposed to save his sons, Nadav and Avihu? What in the world is this argument? So B'ezrat Hashem, in this recording, we're going to try to give a few fun answers and fun approaches, a little bit simpler approaches, lighter answers to this question. And then B'ezrat Hashem, in our next recording, we're going to try to go with some deeper answers to the question. Okay, so what does it mean that he could have answered, God, why did you kill Nadav and Avihu? You taught us the mitzvah of Brit Milah. Okay, so the most popular approach that I saw is brought down in Rabbi Yonatan Eibshitz, is in Yarot Devash. I saw it also brought down in the name of Sefer Ya'alat Chen, as well as the name of the Yismach Moshe. So they're all focused on the 8 part over here, because that's like the clearest connection. You have the 8th day of the Brit Milah, and you have the 8th day of the inauguration. So they answer the question as follows, based on a Gemara in Nida, Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Bet. Says the Gemara in Nida, says Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is explaining why did Hashem pick the 8th day for the circumcision. So why not do it earlier? Do it day 1 to 7. So answers Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, because Hashem was having compassion for the parents. Why? Because we learned in the pasuk right before that the parents must remain separate for the first 7 days due to the tumat leida. There's a certain level of impurity that makes the parents be separate, and out of compassion to the parents, we wait until the 8th day when according to the original biblical halacha, that's when they were allowed to be together again. They no longer have to be separate. But because the first 7 days they're separate, so the Gemara says everyone else is semechim, everyone else is happy at this Brit Milah, but the parents are sad because they have to be separate. So therefore, they wait till day 8. When day 8 biblically, they no longer have to be separate. So it's an idea of compassion for the parents. So says the Yarot Davash, says the Yismach Moshe, says the Ya'alat Chen, they say, oh, that could have been Aaron's argument. Hashem, you taught us by the 8th day of the Brit Milah to have compassion for the parents, but what about me? This is my big day. I'm the Kohen Gadol. This is my 8th day. This is the inauguration of the Mishkan. Why don't you have compassion for me? Where is my compassion? Everyone else gets to be happy. The whole Jewish people we saw in last week's parasha, Vayironu, Vayishtahavu, they're singing, they're dancing, they're bowing down. They were so excited. But not me. Why did you kill Nadav and Avihu? Where was the compassion for me? So that could have been the argument that Aharon made, but ultimately, Vaydom Aharon, he accepts the judgment. Okay, that's answer number 1. Answer number 2, I saw in a different sefer, on one of the commentaries on this midrash Peliyah, there's a sefer that has like a list of commentaries. He writes as follows: part of the halacha from our pasuk is that a Brit Milah takes place on the 8th day. What does that mean on the 8th day? Even if the 8th day falls on Shabbat, that has to be Yom HaShmini. It's a question. Why does it say Bashmini? Why does it say Yom HaShmini? Because even if the 8th day falls on day Shabbat, then we still do the Brit Milah even on Shabbat. So now, that's a funny halacha, because we have a regular halacha. Normally we have a halacha that making a wound on Shabbat is asur. It's hayav mitah. It's an av melacha on Shabbat. It's like one of the biggest things you can do wrong. This is like a really big sin. How in the world can you do a Brit Milah? You're making a wound on Shabbat. Shouldn't you have to postpone it? But in this case, the great mitzvah, Brit Milah, it's so holy, it's so special, it pushes off the Shabbat. I think a couple of years ago we gave it to our Torah a little bit about trying to explain how this works. But the mitzvah Brit Milah pushes off the Av Melacha, the sin of breaking Shabbat. So Aharon could have made the argument and said, my kids weren't over such a big Isur. They weren't breaking Shabbat. It wasn't an Av Melacha. What was their Isur? So according to one of the opinions in Chazal, the sin of Nadav and Avihu was that they did the proper halacha. They were correct in what they did. They were bringing in a fire from down below, as opposed to just relying on the fire that came from up above. But they were horu halacha b'fnei Rabban. But they did it without asking. They did the halacha without asking Moshe and Aharon, were they allowed to do that? And that was the mistake. That was the mistake. But ultimately, it was the correct halacha. It was Lashem Shamayim. They wanted to ignite the Mishkan. They wanted to bring the proper fire in. So this is not as big as breaking an Av Melacha of Shabbat. So in the case of Brit Milah, Shabbat is pushed off. So and Shabbat is such a big melacha that you're over when you're doing a Brit Milah. So shouldn't the lesser issue of being posek in front of your rabbis, shouldn't that be pushed off for our day 8, for our Mishkan of inaugurating the temple, of bringing down the fire down below, of bringing back all the kaparot, all the atonement for the Jewish people? Shouldn't that be a much lesser deal? I don't understand. Okay, so that's approach number 2. Now maybe we'll do approach number 3, Lanutati. Maybe we can say this idea based on something that we said many months ago in a recording regarding the Akedat Yitzchak. Okay, if we go back to the Akedat Yitzchak, we spoke in the past that part of the test of the Akedat took place because of a machloket, a discussion, a little bit of a sibling rivalry that took place between Yitzchak and Ishmael. Ishmael came to Yitzchak the night before the Brit Milah, the night before the Akedah, and Ishmael argued to Yitzchak. He said, Yitzchak, I don't understand. I performed the Brit Milah at age 13. I circumcised myself at age 13. When I remember it, when it really hurt, that's a very powerful sacrifice that I made for Hashem. But you, Yitzchak, you did it at 8 days old. It's a lot less painful when you're a baby. You don't even remember what you did. So my sacrifice for God, my Brit Milah at 13 years old, is much greater than yours at day number 8. So Yitzchak responds to Ishmael. He says, you know what? I'm willing to sacrifice my whole body. Not just one part of it, not just one ever, not just one part we're going to get rid of the Orla. I'm willing to give up my whole life to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then that becomes the test of the Akedat Yitzchak, of Yitzchak being willing to give up his whole life for Hashem. And ultimately he does it. Ultimately he follows Abraham up into the mountain. He's willing to die, sticks out his neck. He says, Abba, tie me down tight, sacrifice me for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But ultimately Hashem says, no. Yitzchak, you proved yourself. Avraham, you proved yourself. You guys have the biggest Yirat Hashem ever. But you're almost self-sacrifice is enough. But what comes out in the end is that a Jew is not supposed to be doing this Akedat Yitzchak of dying for God needlessly. There's no, I have to prove myself, so let me do like human sacrifice. No. The Brit Milah, that's enough. That's enough. The argument with Ishmael, ultimately Yitzchak proved he's willing to do much, much more. But that 8-day Brit Milah, that's all that Hashem desires. He does not desire us dying. So maybe we could say that that's what Aharon could have argued to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that when Moshe is saying to me, B'krovaya Kadesh, that my sons were so holy, which according to some opinions say that I thought we would ignite the Mishkan, we would ignite the Mizbeach, we would bring down the heavenly fire, and we would do that full Akedat Yitzchak. But actually they're more holy because they're the one that actually died. They're the ones who do the literal, physical die with the Akedat Yitzchak to ignite the Mishkan. But didn't we learn from the fact that you didn't take Yitzchak, Hashem, from the fact that he wasn't an actual korban, that you didn't want him to die, that the Brit Milah is enough, that's enough, and that's all the sacrifice we need is to cut off the Orla, but not to actually give up our lives? So how come HaKadosh Baruch Hu did you make an Akedah with our sons? How come you made Nadav and Avihu die and do an Akedah Yitzchak with Akedah Nadav and Avihu? Shouldn't the Brit Milah they did been good enough? And that was his argument of the Yom HaShmini. Maybe we could say that. Okay, so those are 3 simple approaches to this midrash. Bezat Hashem, in the next part of this recording, we're going to try to get a bit deeper with a couple more approaches. Shabbat Shalom.